is 9/11 Freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I'm your host, Andy Steele, and tonight my guests are going to be Kelly David, the Chief Operating Officer of AE911Truth, and Ted Walter, super activist and AE911Truth staff member also. And they're going to be talking about the latest effort reaching out to the AIA. A resolution is going to be voted on at this year's convention. This is exciting news, a big step forward, and they're going to be going into the details around that. I'll be playing the interview for you in just about 10 minutes or so. I want to take the opportunity to go over some news first. The first bit of news I'm going to report on is that the Niels Herrick court case has been decided. I reported last week that it was going to be decided sometime in April. That was the information I was getting, and that's what I think a lot of people thought, but it came back sooner than expected. And unfortunately, Niels lost, but reading the newspaper accounts and talking to the people who are close to the event, the outcome of this case had absolutely nothing to do with the validity of the 9/11 truth evidence. It had to do with freedom of speech issues. You know, if a reporter wants to be on the wrong side of history and make statements that don't really have any support, just throw out uninformed opinions, they got a right to do that. And that was kind of essentially what the case boiled down to. There's some reporting on that and claiming that this is a loss. I mean, it's a loss in the case. However, we got reporters now writing about 9/11 truth issues when previously they wouldn't have been. So, anytime that you create friction, you win. Niels Herrick is a brave guy, very smart guy, and definitely an asset for this world, for this movement. And I can't wait to see what he does next. So that was the outcome of that. I also want to take this time to talk about an article that's up at AE911Truth.org. It's written by Craig McKee. It's titled, Smithsonian TV Pushes Absurd Collapse Scenario. And what I find really interesting about this is not the fact that a corporate media channel is attacking 9/11 Truth. That's kind of par for the course. But the fact that they're trying to find alternative explanations for what we witnessed that day. Trying to explain away the evidence outside of the NIST report, outside of what NIST itself acknowledges, trying to look at every potential explanation other than the most obvious explanation, which is controlled demolition, which is in fact what happened that day to the Twin Towers in Building 7. But this article starts out, says, the Twin Towers episode of the Smithsonian Channel series Conspiracy, The Missing Evidence, which aired last November in the UK, presents the case made by chemist Frank Greening and metallurgist Christian Simonsen that the Twin Tower fires melted the aluminum airplanes and that this molten aluminum came into contact with water from the building's sprinkler system, thus setting off explosions that ultimately brought both skyscrapers down. And then you go down a little, it continues. Greening and Simonsen say that the presence of the plane wreckage in the towers was something that should have been taken into consideration by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which released its final report on the collapse of the North and South Towers in 2005. Then it goes on. The aluminum water explosion hypothesis is impossible and absurd, according to Richard Gage, AIA, who was flown to New York by the Smithsonian Channel for a 2-hour interview with the show's producers about the evidence for controlled demolition. And it says in parentheses, unlike the interviews with Greening and Simonsen, most of the evidence Gage presented ended up on the cutting room floor. And then Richard goes on, besides being impossible, the aluminum water hypothesis utterly fails to explain any of the forensic, eyewitness, or video evidence from that day. And then it lists evidence points. Symmetrical explosions moving down the face of the towers at near freefall acceleration. Lateral ejections from all facades, from massive explosions hurling 4-ton structural steel sections laterally at 60 miles an hour, landing 600 feet away. Unignited nanothermite incendiaries found in the World Trade Center dust. Billions of previously molten iron microspheres also found in the dust. Near freefall acceleration of the buildings. 90,000 tons of concrete pulverized into fine powder in midair. missing stack of 110 pancaked floors. And of course, that's not even the explanation. Some people think that is the explanation, that it was a pancake collapse. But no, the pile driver theory is what NIST has gone with and what they have stuck to this day. These features point to controlled demolition, Gage contends. The aluminum water explosion hypothesis, on the contrary, would be asymmetrical and could not totally destroy the building. We saw the shattering of almost every structural element, one from another. A couple of aluminum water explosions, even if the right conditions existed, could only account for a couple of explosions at or below the point of jet plane impacts. Also mentions this in the article. Chris Sarnes, a writer for AE911Truth, says that the massive explosion that Greening and Simonson insist initiated the tower's collapse simply could not have taken place. The aluminum would only have dribbled down as it melted. Sarnes explains, in order to cause an explosion, it would take a whole lot of aluminum coming into contact with a lot of water, all at once. While high-energy explosives can destroy steel building frames, kerosene or aluminum explosions don't have anywhere near the pushing power, the power to actually displace structural steel components. And then Richard adds, that's why they don't design explosives with aluminum and water. Now, Frank Legg also chimed in on this. He says, both towers very obviously came down from the top, not as a result of a single massive explosion, but as a result of a sequence of moderate explosions. Videos show puffs of dust indicating where and when the explosions occurred. All right, and these puffs are descending, or are in a descending sequence. Both towers came down with uniform acceleration, which indicates that the explosions were set off with very precise timing. The timing was such as to allow the falling debris to get a little ahead of the demolition layers. So, basically, I think it's interesting that they're actually trying to look for alternative explanations in this, and it means that we're having an impact. I mean, the message is getting out there. The corporate media knows that they have to deal with these very inconvenient facts about 9/11. And then finally this, and this is, again, par for the course, as I mentioned before, but more troubling than the insupportable claims of this lame hypothesis, though, said Richard Gage, is the ongoing pattern of deception employed by numerous mainstream film producers who have interviewed him over the years. At least 95% of the evidence he shares with them gets omitted from the end product. The Smithsonian used only one small section of the broad swatch of damning information I provided, the evidence for explosions, and they used it to set up their aluminum/water explosion hypothesis. This was completely unethical. It's all manipulation. It would seem they are purposely deceiving their audience. The one-sided slant of the program is readily apparent throughout its voiceover. The narrator describes the evidence presented by AE911Truth and the 9/11 Truth movement's use of that evidence as the outlandish claims of the theorists and the fanatical rumors by those with an obsession for online conspiracy sites. In a half-hearted jab at the official story, the narrator asserts that the failure of the NIST report to explain the collapse provided fertile ground for conspiracy theories. So they turn their nose up and pretend they're experts when it's clear they don't really even know what they're talking about. But what I find very interesting is that last statement saying that NIST hasn't really explained the collapse. So once you shove away all the dander and phony outrage, essentially the position that this show is taking agrees with us. Agrees that the reports aren't acceptable. They haven't explained what happened. And so they should be signing the petition too, whoever produced this show, whoever wrote these statements. All right, they should be calling for a new investigation into why these buildings came down, because by their own admission, in this very shoddy hit piece, they're admitting that NIST never explained it. That it didn't account for all of the evidence. So I bet you that the Smithsonian Channel people would be surprised to know that they agree with us. But they do. So why don't they endorse a new investigation? But to read the full article, you can go to AE911Truth.org. I'm about to play my interview now with Ted Walter and Kelly David to talk about the AIA resolution. Before I do that, though, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We're going to do that beginning now. And that is 10 seconds. Ted Walter is a public policy analyst by trade, as well as being the Director of Strategic Initiatives for Architects and Engineers for 911Truth. Prior to his current role with AE911Truth, he was the Director of NYC CAN's High-Rise Safety Initiative, as well as the Campaign Manager for AE911Truth's Rethink 9/11 campaign. Ted has been active in advocating for a new 9/11 investigation since 2009 when he founded NYC CAN together with a group of 9/11 family members. And Kelly David. Kelly is a board member for AE911Truth and its chief operating officer. She spearheaded many great things we do here in this organization, and she's been on this show before to talk about the great things that are coming in 2015. And today she's going to be talking about the great thing that's happening now with the latest actions with AIA. So guys, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
What is going on with AIA? Let us bring our audience up to date. Let them know, first of all, what is AIA and why are we trying to get them to support us?
Yeah, so the AIA, that's short for the American Institute of Architects, and it's the largest professional association of architects in the country. It has about 83,000 members, and as many people know, Richard Gage is a member of the AIA, as are many other of AE911Truth's petition signers. So the AIA, really, if you want to bring attention to the issue of 9/11 and the destruction of the World Trade Center buildings, the AIA really is, at least among architects, the primary venue with which to raise awareness and reach other architects.
That's right. It's a professional organization. I mean, many times when you hear doctors cite things, they'll cite the AMA, and then the dentist, the ADA. So these professional organizations are very important to show direction, to show support for new initiatives, show support for new technologies that may come up in their fields. But it's what people in these professions look to for direction, and particularly architects. And it's funny, I never thought about architects or the field of architecture before getting involved with 9/11, and if 9/11 hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't even know anything about this stuff. But really, AIA is the big cheese when it comes to this field of study. Not just in America either, because I see that they have chapters in other countries, or what I perceive to be other countries. Am I right in saying that? I've noticed places like Micronesia, but I don't know if Micronesia is a territory of the U.S. or another country. Do they have chapters outside of America? Do you know?
They do. They're sort of regional chapters. I think there's one that's Europe, and then there's regions outside the U.S. and they can be both American architects residing in those areas of the world, but also foreigners can also be members of the AIA, though I believe that it's a slightly different membership status from the normal AIA member who's also an American citizen.
So basically, the people around the world look to AIA for leadership in the architectural field, and I think that comes with just the status of America in the world, despite the post-9/11 world that we've witnessed. When the AIA says something or looks at something, people pay attention, even if they're not Americans. So first of all, before we get into what's going on now, over the years, prior to you guys really becoming involved in this effort, what has been done to try to reach out to the AIA previous years?
We have done some mailings to them. We've mailed our DVD, Experts Speak Out, a couple of technical papers to the board of directors of the AIA. Basic things like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it was 2013 was the first year. It might have been 2012. I think that was pretty much the year that we did that. And then after that, we had mailed some more information to them last year, and we were hoping that we would get a better response. Every year we try. We go to the convention, and what ends up happening is they basically tell us that they're not going to take a position in our favor. They basically just don't want to go against the official story.
Well, there's a lot of pressure on building professionals to essentially not rock the boat with regard to this issue. I've said it before on this show. I don't imagine that most architects or engineers went into the profession realizing that they'd have to take a a stance on something so critical and so important, not just to the history of their profession and the integrity of their profession, but also to the history and to integrity of our country and of the world. And so many people are finding themselves in positions they never imagined themselves having to be in, having to come out against an official story regarding something that should be the least controversial aspect of 9/11, how the buildings came down, forgetting all the other stuff associated with 9/11 that people get into and use as their area of focus. This should be the least controversial aspect, but it's turned into the most controversial. Now, I don't think it's controversial. I, just as a layman, can watch Building 7 come down and know that fire didn't cause that. That should not be controversial, but given the political ramifications of this event, as you guys well know, it's very difficult for people to see or to acknowledge what's in front of them. There's a lot of social, not just the social pressure that everybody faces, but professional pressure too. So first of all, before we get into the nitty-gritty of how this came about, you guys sent out an action alert back in last week before this program airs, describing what's happening. What's going to be happening with the AIA? Why are you guys here today to talk about it?
Sure. So we, a few weeks ago, we submitted a resolution to be considered at the convention, to be voted on by the delegates, the voting delegates at this year's convention. The resolution, there's a resolution process. So every year there's a handful of resolutions that are submitted by, whether it's a local AIA chapter or a group of members or the AIA board of directors. Every year, several resolutions are considered. They're asking for all sorts of things, various issues facing architects. And one of the things that the AIA has is basically a set of public policies and position statements, which basically say this is what the AIA believes. These are the sorts of government policies that the AIA supports. And so we realized, because we've been working for several years to reach out to the AIA and its membership, we realized that, this resolution process and the public policies and position statements combined represented a pretty unique opportunity for us to really raise the level of dialogue about the World Trade Center destruction. And so we drafted a resolution that calls upon the AIA Board of Directors to adopt a position statement that's supportive of a new investigation into the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7. And in order to submit the resolution to be considered at the convention, the resolution needed to be, co-sponsored by several different groups, whether that's a local chapter or the AIA Board of Directors. For us, the opportunity that applied was to have at least 50 members of the AIA co-sponsor the resolution, and that would be enough to have it considered at the convention. And so AE, because it's been doing all this work over the past several years of educating architects and getting more and more architects and engineers to sign a petition, we have approximately 150, maybe even close to 200 petition signers who currently are or have been members of the AIA in the past. So we began reaching out to them to see if they would co-sponsor this resolution. And it was submitted a few weeks ago, and we found out last week that the AIA's resolutions committee had accepted it for, to be considered at the convention. So that's basically the gist of it. And really what this allows for is, it's just a much bigger vehicle for us to have the discussion with our fellow AIA members at the convention, before the convention, in the business meeting that will be happening on May 16th at the convention in Atlanta. And, very, very, very possibly for this resolution to actually be passed. And if that happens, if the delegates, a majority of the delegates approve the resolution, the potato then gets passed on to the AIA Board of Directors, and they either will vote to ratify the resolution or not ratify it. And obviously that's another hurdle. But if we get it passed, we hope that the Board of Directors will feel compelled to follow the lead of their membership and ratify the resolution and make it the AIA's official policy to support a new investigation into the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7.
Right, and our audience, in all this talk about voting and resolutions and board of directors, I think it kind of glosses over the significance of this act. I mean, I will take the risk and say this is probably the most important vote AIA has ever done in its history, given the ramifications and significance of 9/11. And it seems like the most easy thing to vote on. I mean, even people who don't support us, even people who argue with us, most times when I talk to them will still support rerunning the analysis, investigating it simply to address the questions that are being raised by these 2,000 building experts, to address the controversy. And why not address it? I mean, it's something that happened. It was an unprecedented event, the collapse of Building 7. I use that word loosely, collapse, with quotes around it. But this was an unprecedented event, and so this is something that should be studied by the architectural profession for years to come to at least prevent something like this from ever happening again. So it's significant in the fact that they are actually officially taking this up, that they're actually going to vote on this, and it's a very exciting thing for our movement, and I think for this nation. I mean, I think this might be one of the times that the corporate media might take notice of something that AIA is doing. I don't know what normally the focus of resolutions are at the AIA convention, but this is something that is going to get people's attention, and people are going to have an opinion on this one way or another if they're asked about this. I think people, even if they don't want to openly acknowledge that they're paying attention to this or focusing on it, people have an opinion, and people will be interested to see what happens as a result of this resolution. Now, when you guys were calling AIA members, and this is something to note too, we've had AIA members on this show. Richard Gage, of course, the CEO, as I think Ted mentioned earlier, is an AIA member, but we have FAIA members, and that does a particularly important classification of AIA member. That means you're a fellow, and there's more that comes with that. We've had Dan Barnum on this program to talk about what that means, so folks can listen to that in the archives. But we got a number of members who are, or a number of petition signers who are members of the AIA. What was the reaction of some of these people when you talked to them and said that you were going about this process and pursuing this resolution?
Well, overall, everyone that we spoke to was really delighted to hear that we were doing it, and there was very little hesitation about adding their name to the resolution as co-sponsors. So it was just like, I mean, some people were overjoyed the fact that we were using this process in order to generate the dialogue that's needed. And just an incredible amount of enthusiasm. And, these are folks that have signed the AE911Truth petition already. So they've already taken that public stand. They've already, decided that it's their ethical responsibility to call for a new investigation into the collapse of Building 7. So they had no hesitation about putting their name out there in front of all the other AIA members as being supportive of this resolution, and their openness and their enthusiasm and their determination will hopefully be contagious and will help other members of the AIA understand that there's no reason to be quiet about this. And if you have concerns about a 47-story high-rise collapsing supposedly from fires, you should speak out, and we're giving you a legitimate way to do so that will actually lead somewhere and lead to this very reputable large organization taking a stand on this vitally important issue.
Right, and you talk about determination and enthusiasm, and I just want to take this moment to highlight Ted here. So many times things happen and people don't know about the folks behind the scenes. Now, Ted's very modest here, but Ted is the one who came up with this idea, who spearheaded all of this and did all of the necessary work for most of it to get this done, and he did it in a relatively short amount of time. So I want to take the time to acknowledge Ted here, who's sort of the silent and behind the scenes guy, kind of like the Thomas Jefferson here of the 9/11 movement, making these things happen. And again, my hat's off to you, because you really struck gold with this. Regardless of what happens, it's a great idea, and you did it in a relatively short amount of time, I guess, right? I mean, how long did it take you to actually get all of these names and get this submitted?
It was a period of about 2 weeks, but we had been really we're in the process of looking at our strategy. How do we raise our outreach to the architecture and engineering professions to the next level? And so there was a lot of research that went into identifying this opportunity. And as soon as it just sort of crystallized, we said, oh, look, we have time to do this. We have time to reach out to all of our petition signers who are AIA members and ask them to co-sponsor the resolution. And so we acted, and I appreciate your compliments, and I think they're a little too generous, but it's greatly appreciated. But of course, it's what we all do. We all work very hard for this issue because we care so strongly about the ramifications of 9/11, and we want to write the course of history. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue, obviously, that affects everybody, whether they know about it or not. I think this is one of the most critical issues in American history, and I don't think that I'm overstating it. I mean, this is right up there with freeing ourselves from the control of Great Britain and with abolishing slavery. I consider being forced to swallow an official story that doesn't even hold water is just, I mean, on its face, incorrect. I consider that a form of tyranny and slavery, being forced to say that 2 + 2 = 5, essentially. And I really think that this is the direction that the 9/11 Truth movement needs to take. I mean, I understand how it's personally satisfying to stand on the street and protest at Ground Zero each year. And I mean, there's a place for that, and there's a place for handing out brochures and confronting officials, but also there's this kind of work that needs to be done. It's identifying which organizations, which individuals out there in our society have the most influence, and reaching out to them, doing the behind-the-scenes work and going through these processes, getting people who are members of that organization to support a resolution like this. And, 2 weeks is a relatively short amount of time, considering all the work that goes into from certain groups to get recognition on petitions and how long that can take. And the fact that these people are so willing, so quick to put their name to it shows just how passionate they are, just like Ted said. Now, if the resolution passes, what do you think the impact on the cause itself is going to be? I mean, I know we're not prophets here, but we can speculate a little bit, and I want to get both your interpretations or your insight on this. What kind of impact do you think will have if this resolution does pass?
I think it would be pretty big for the movement, because we haven't had such a large agency, and especially one that's involved in architecture, which is our thing, come even close to supporting us in any way. So I think it would have a large impact, and I think it would be. We haven't done anything like this before, and nothing has come close to this.
Ted, what is your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, well, I agree with Kelly. I think that it's going to have a large impact, and it's difficult to foresee exactly what shape that's going to take. But the other hurdle of just the resolution passing, if that were to happen, would be huge news that I expect the mainstream media to take notice of to some extent. It will be very, very interesting to see how the AIA Board of Directors responds if the resolution's passed. There's very clear language in the rules of the AIA that says the Board of Directors doesn't have to ratify every resolution that's passed by its members. So, that'll be another phase that we'll have to wait and see what happens. And if it passes, we would hope that they would feel compelled to follow the lead of their membership, and we hope that there will. Maybe we will attempt to, if it does pass, rally support and pressure to have the resolution ratified. And if the board of directors ratifies it, then we are talking about, in the official public policies and position statements of the AIA, that there will be this statement regarding World Trade Center Building 7 and the need for a new investigation of it, and that will reverberate throughout the architecture profession. it will be followed by the mainstream media, architects, lay people, everyone who has been sort of vaguely aware of this issue for a long time, who's sort of just dismissed it, just because on the face of it, maybe it sounds, out there and not possible, will take notice of it, and we'll see that a majority of the delegates of the AIA were properly educated about the issue and saw that, of course, this is troubling that a 47-story high-rise could collapse supposedly because of fire, and we support a new investigation of this incident. That will that'll just open the door for millions of people to look at the issue more seriously and objectively. And there's really no telling what the knock-on effects could be. It could be really, really tremendous. And of course, we have to do a lot of work to, if it does get passed and ratified, we have to do a lot of work to make sure that we maximize the impact of it, of that becoming the AIA's position statement. Because the AIA may not go and put out a press release saying, "Hey, we support a new investigation now." That might fall on us to do the work of notifying the public of that event. So we'll see, but we know that it'll have a huge impact, and we feel that as far as our outreach to the architecture community, this is probably the most important thing that has happened in several years.
Well, I'll have no problem spreading the word. I'll be out there with my tricorner hat and bell, not literally, of course, folks, but I'll be out there spreading the word, telling people, so they don't have to worry about putting out a press release at all. I'll be happy to spread the word for them. And I hope that AIA recognizes their power here. I mean, the mainstream, and I got to stop saying mainstream media, the corporate media, all right, they can take maybe one person, one or two people, and say, well, even though he's a brilliant scientist or he's an architect for 30 years, he's still just a conspiracy theorist. They can get away with that, try to marginalize a few people. But when the AIA comes out and says something, all right, calling the AIA one big conspiracy theorist is just going to look foolish. And the AIA should recognize this, that they really do have the authority. The mainstream media, the corporate media, really doesn't have any leg to stand on if the AIA comes out and endorses a new investigation. Again, it's not coming out and saying even it was a controlled demolition. It's not even coming out and saying anything about conspiracy or whatnot. Just simply calling for a new investigation to investigate the questions that the over 2,000 building experts, and probably even more who haven't even signed the petition, who are aware of this issue, have about this unprecedented event. It's the most common sense position anybody can take. Again, this should be the least controversial aspect of the 9/11 event. And so I don't think that the AIA has anything to worry about from the media or even government officials because, again, they are the AIA. They have the power to have their voices be heard. And I think that the corporate media has lost a lot of its voice now as the alternative media has eclipsed it in the years out of necessity because the corporate media has failed us, beginning with this issue and on other issues. Now, you guys are going to be going to the AIA convention. It's in May of this year in Atlanta, Georgia. And I want to know, what can we expect at the convention? What kind of activities are you guys going to be carrying out to educate the attendees about the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence?
So every year, AE911Truth has a booth at the convention, and that's how we've managed to get so many AIA members to sign the petition. So we're following that model to a certain extent, but we're certainly this year going above and beyond. We have a booth that's going to be twice the size that we've had in the past, which is the normal size of 10 foot by 10 foot. So this booth will be 20 feet by 10 feet, very close to the main entrance of the convention room. So everyone that walks into the room is going to see the booth and, of course, be attracted to it and want to come talk to us. And we are also going to be, making sure that we reach every single delegate who will actually be voting on the resolution. So there's an area in the convention room where all the delegates will be going to cast their votes for the various candidates, various management positions at the AIA. before the business meeting happens. So we'll actually be able to reach every single delegate, give them our flyer, give them the DVD, the 15-minute DVD of Ed Asner, the Solving the Mystery of WTC 7. And we'll also be doing a lot of outreach. And I forgot to mention that we will also, we are sponsoring or covering the costs of several AIA members who co-sponsored the resolution to attend the convention. So they will actually be the ones who are speaking with and educating their fellow architects about the resolution. We will also be doing a lot of work in the lead up to the convention. We have about 7 or 8 weeks until the convention happens. And so we're not waiting until the convention. We will be mailing all of the local AIA chapters, our pamphlet about the resolution. We will be setting up a landing page where AIA members can go to learn about the resolution, making sure that the link to that page gets disseminated all over on Facebook with the various AIA chapters Facebook pages. We will ask each chapter to actually send out an email to their members, about this resolution and ask them to go to the landing page if they want to learn more. So we really expect that, the overall benefit of this, even if it doesn't get passed, is that tens of thousands of AIA members will learn that this resolution is being considered. Just that alone brings an unprecedented level of attention to it within the architecture profession. And thousands of those will actually go to our website, will actually read our pamphlet. And from those, several hundred, maybe 1,000, we don't know exactly how many delegates, but however many delegates will be thoroughly educated about the collapse, quote unquote, of World Trade Center Building 7. And, the biggest problem that we're facing is, that we still have a problem of people simply not being aware of Building 7. And so we really strongly believe that a lot of these AIA members simply learning that this collapse happened, learning that this building descended in free fall, that alone will be enough for a lot of people to realize what's going on. And we are really highly confident, optimistic that a majority of the delegates will see that this resolution is totally reasonable. It's not asking the AIA to take a position and say, we think that NIST, was fraudulent in its investigation, or, it's simply, we've worded the resolution very carefully so that what the AIA is doing by adopting this position is saying we recognize that there are many members of the architecture profession who believe that the NIST investigation did not adhere to the scientific method and was therefore, that the conclusions of the investigation were therefore fatally flawed. And because of that, we think that their perspective merits further study, and we support a new investigation. So it's because of that we think that it has a very good chance of passing. We're not asking the AIA itself to take a position on what happened. We're asking them to support a new investigation, recognizing that many members of their profession believe that the first investigation was not adequate.
Right, and how can you not recognize it when it's a fact? Many members of the profession don't think that the investigation was accurate, and some believe that there were placed explosives in the buildings. This is what the evidence shows. But again, AIA is not being asked to take a position in the debate, only to recognize that this debate is happening. And since, a few people died on 9/11 and a few people died in the wars that followed, maybe we should get a better understanding of this event. These kind of controversies don't do very good things to our country. I'm not going to keep my mouth shut because I'm worried about what it will do to America, the controversy over 9/11. The controversy exists because the investigation is wrong. That's the position I take. But the fact that this controversy is allowed to keep on going for over a decade now, unaddressed, really, other than smear pieces by the corporate media, is not good. This is not good. And conspiracy theories, quote unquote, arise when you don't address questions, when you react this way to people's very reasonable questions about this event. So it makes our country less safe. As well, for the architectural profession, as Richard Gage has said so often, withholding data about Building 7 and the computer models by NIST makes our people less safe. Architectural and engineering professionals need this information in order to make the buildings safer, in order to study this event and make the buildings better. All right? I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but that's what it really boils down to. And I guess this always just amazes me over the years is how reasonable our position is and how unreasonably the establishment figures act. Now, with the corporate media people, these aren't architects or engineers. They essentially just make a living out of towing the company line when it comes to 9/11 and the official story. But the fact that NIST withholds data, the fact that they refuse to test the dust for explosives. I mean, if it's so unreasonable to think that that could have happened, why wouldn't you just run the same tests that Niels Harrod and his team did? I mean, most people assume this stuff has already happened, and you talked earlier about the fact that a lot of architects and engineers have not even seen this building come down, don't even know about this third building that fell. I think that a lot of them are going to have their eyes opened by the actions that you guys are taking. Now, Ted, I'm going to ask you this. I know you got asked this during High Rise, but why is it just focused on Building 7 and not the Twin Towers?
Well, I think we all recognize that there's a learning curve when it comes to 9/11, and we recognize that Building 7 is a good starting point for educating people about 9/11. A lot of people made their entries into the 9/11 Truth movement by first learning about Building 7, and immediately when they saw it, realizing that something was wrong. It's a matter of what we think will be the most effective for moving the dialogue in the direction that we want to with the AIA. It's pragmatic as well. It's simply that we are serious about getting this resolution passed, and we believe that a majority of the AIA members and delegates will be willing to support this resolution. But in the current environment, calling for a new investigation into the World Trade Center towers destruction is a step too far, and that's fine. This is not to say that at the convention we may not be also talking about what happened to the Twin Towers, but we think as far as the AIA's public policies and position statements, that's a step. World Trade Center Building 7 is a step that the AIA is capable of taking.
Yeah, and regardless of what happens with this, the fact that this is even being done and being voted on is a tremendous step. People expect things to happen overnight, and that's not how the real world works. And I've said this before in interviews and different times on the show. We kind of have this assumption sometimes that human thought is like a logic proof in high school, that if you have this circumstance then this will happen, that people will make decisions based off of the most logical outcomes of those decisions. But I've learned this in life. There's a lot of illogical factors that go into human decision making. I remember this when I was overseas. We couldn't use a sewing room because somebody thought there was a ghost in it. Just silly stuff that's an extreme example, but there's social pressure we talked about before. There's just fear sometimes, even though people have more power and the sky is not going to fall if you acknowledge that Building 7 needs to be reinvestigated. People have that ingrained in them. I think the corporate media helps instill that fear in us, and kind of puts out this idea that the government is so powerful that it's just watching everything that you do. Some of that stuff goes on, but as William Binney talked about when he was on the show, they're collecting so much data they can't spy on everybody. And I equate it to one of these wannabe tough guys that keeps on telling you that they're going to put you on their revenge list if you are smart to them or make a joke to them. And it really just is a lot of bluster and intimidation. And when people actually start speaking out, they realize that all that intimidation is really just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. And we can get rid of the self-censorship if we're just real with each other. But if we start with these baby steps like Ted's talking about, the fact that a 47-story steel frame high-rise doesn't just fall down in 7 seconds because of a random fire. That just doesn't happen. It doesn't make sense on its face. But when you actually start looking at the evidence, and you start looking at the 105 feet of free fall, you start looking at the fact that the features of Building 7's design were left out in the analysis, then a new investigation is the most common sense position you can take. Now, how are you prepared to respond for either outcome of the resolution vote?
Well, I think that if it doesn't pass, and that's certainly a possibility that we need to be prepared for, I think that the thought is that we might try this again next year, and next year instead of 55 co-sponsors, we'll have perhaps 200 or 300, and we'll continue to use this process to the extent that it's available to have the dialogue every year. That's one thought. But we'll see. It really depends on what the vote count is and what the reception of the AIA members is this year at the convention. This could be probably our most productive convention ever, of course, because the resolution's there. But with this resolution going on, with all the AIA members that will be there at the booth, talking to their fellow architects, we hope that this will also, gain several hundred more petition signers. And that's the rate that we want to be going at in the future is, we want to be gaining hundreds of petition signers every month, maybe even 1,000 every month. Who knows? That's where we want to get to, in order to turn this, the tide, in our direction. And we think that this will be the first step to that, even if the resolution doesn't pass this year.
Right, and again, as I said, these things happen in increments. I mean, every once in a while, you make a big jump in the evolution, and I guess in this case, it's the evolution of public awareness, and something big happens. But these things, will happen in baby steps, and you got to overcome tremendous social pressure there too. But what I love about this is how involved AE911Truth is among its volunteer staff. We have volunteers going down there. We have AIA members going down there. And I hear so many people get excited about sporting events, the Super Bowl, the World Series, talking about what someone else is doing, what someone else is participating in, and people get excited about being spectators, watching it on the sidelines. But this is our Super Bowl. This is our World Series. This is the exciting thing that is happening in America right now, even if it's not blasted all over the corporate media. And the great thing about it is that our audience doesn't need to be spectators. They can participate, not just in helping with this resolution here, but in pushing the 9/11 Truth message and telling people about the evidence. It's an ongoing battle, an information war for the heart and soul of America and for the integrity of science. I've talked about that so many times. That is so important to protect the integrity of science, because we don't progress unless we have a certain set of rules to move forward with and we can agree on. And one of those things is that 105 feet of free fall is not possible unless you have explosives in a building helping bring it down. All right, physics did not stand down on 9/11. All right, so we can all participate, and this is an ongoing thing. I want to get from both of you, how can our audience help out in this effort? What are some of the things they can do to help with this resolution and raise awareness about it?
Well, they can spread the word. If they know any architects, engineers, make them aware of the resolution, show them the pamphlet that we put together that we are sending out.
Yeah, if you know people out there, architects or engineers who have been not wanting to look into it or just haven't gotten on top of it, like, this is a reason now for them to really look at it. So we have that brochure that Kelly mentioned. By the way, you can look at our brochure and look at all the information about the resolution if you go to AE's Facebook page. It's right now the most current post on the AE Facebook page. So yeah, give the you can just print out the resolution or download the PDF and email it to your friends or to your fellow architects in your architecture firm or whoever, and say, look at this, look what AE is doing. Of course, it costs money for us to send people to the convention, to do all the things. I mean, we're going to be waging a major campaign here to persuade, educate the delegates to vote in favor of this resolution. So if you can manage a donation, we really need it. We need to raise hopefully $25,000 by the end of this week. And we're a third of the way there right now. So chip in if you can. And then look for other opportunities to volunteer for AE in your local area. And we're really, probably this is the year of like putting focus on the architecture and engineering communities and seeing where we can get with those groups. And so, yeah, like outreach in your local area, or if it's at a university, college students studying architecture or engineering. That's where we want to put the focus this year.
Yeah, I think about this World War I propaganda poster I saw where it shows a child talking to his father, and the child is saying to the father, what did you do during the Great War? Something to that effect. And the father's got this horrified look on his face, realizing that he didn't go throw himself on the enemy's bayonet for empire. That's the message they're trying to put in people's hearts there. But with this, for a real battle for valor, for the real battle for freedom and democracy, which is in 9/11 Truth, what are you going to say you were doing? I'm saying this to the audience. What were you doing during the great battle for 9/11 Truth in the 21st century? All right, what did you do to participate? And even if you can't help out with this resolution effort, there's millions of small things that you can do every single day to put forth the 9/11 Truth information, to educate your fellow man. Even if you don't get an immediate acknowledgement from the government and from the media saying, hey, these buildings were brought down into controlled demolition, that knowledge is still out there. Don't think they don't know that. Don't think they aren't afraid of that. Don't think that we haven't had an impact on history. Look how vigilant the public is now. Look at certain world events. Watch C-SPAN's Washington Journal every morning and see how people respond. The great majority of people don't trust the government anymore. And this is from both sides, Democrat and Republican. All right. And a lot of it is because of this issue. Whether people acknowledge it or not, this is the gateway issue. This is the issue that lets you know there's serious issues here. So, what are you doing to spread the word? What are you doing to get the information out to your friends and neighbors and let them in on this secret that's really not a secret anymore, folks? It's out there. And as soon as we discover our power, I talked about it earlier in this show, realizing that you were really not alone, that the isolation and the fear is something that's being generated to keep you quiet, it's really liberating. That's real freedom. All right, freedom is not just what's in the Constitution. Freedom is having that peace of mind and knowing that you are in the side of right and that you are telling the truth and you're doing everything you can and that you can look back at your life with a clear conscience and know that you did everything you could to wake up your fellow man and make the world a better place for the next generations that come. Because that's really what it's about. Because you can't let them get away with this, folks. If you ever dealt with a bully, you know that unless you stand up, eventually they're going to just keep on pushing you around. And I consider this bullying when you tell people that physics stood down on 9/11, which essentially is what NIST and our media establishment is doing. I want to get you guys' ideas on what I just said here. What are some of the other small things people can do every day beyond this resolution effort to get the word out, to spread awareness of AE911 Truth and what we're doing and the message that we bring?
Well, they could start out by sharing this information with their family and friends that aren't aware. There's tons of things that you could do from that point forward. Like you mentioned, contacting Congress. There's so many things that can be done beyond just volunteering for AE. The most important thing is getting the word out to as many places, to as many people, and the more people that know about this, the better chance that we have.
Yeah, and having that willingness to just have a conversation with everybody that you meet, that you talk to, at parties or family gatherings or at your workplace. By having these conversations constantly, like that, way more than any money can buy, is having thousands of people, tens of thousands of people talking about it all the time.
Yeah, folks, and talking to people doesn't just equate to having arguments with some troll on Facebook and just trying to get the last word in and monitoring Facebook so you aren't letting them get the last word. You see so many people keeping this confined to the internet. All right, and if we keep it confined to the internet and something happens to the internet, then 9/11 Truth dies on the internet. That's not a good thing. All right, we need to take this out to the streets. Look, do as much as you can to spread the word. Again, you're actively participating in one of the most important struggles, definitely in our lifetime, in this generation's lifetime, probably in the last 100 years. Now, in our last couple of minutes, because we're getting people inspired here, people are going to want to help out in other ways. Volunteers. We always need volunteers. We need people to do things. What are positions or tasks that we need right now at AE911Truth for volunteers to fill?
There's a lot of it. We always need volunteers. There's always projects that come up. The verifications team needs help. The web team really needs help. So if there's anyone out there with HTML skills or programming skills, please go to our website under Contact Us, fill out the volunteer form. We need help on pretty much every other team, but those are the main teams.
That's right, folks. So there's a position for everybody. Even if you got some talent that Kelly didn't mention right now, you've got some weird talent. I mean, we could probably find a use for it. Something that you can bring to the table. I mean, if you're a musician, write 911 Truth songs. I'm sure that we could find something that you could do for AE 911 Truth. The key is just to generate that resistance, that friction against the machine, as so many people have talked about before. So bring it. I mean, this is important. And we also have a lot of fun here, too. You know, I mean, just because the buildings were brought down in a controlled demolition, and we're fighting against the media brick wall, which is crumbling, and the government brick wall, which is crumbling, doesn't mean that you can't enjoy yourself while you do it, too. So go to AE911Truth.org, volunteer however you can, whenever you can, but fill that out, and someone will get in touch with you. Guys, any final thoughts before we conclude the interview?
Well, I'm always thankful for all the work that's gone into the years of AE911Truth building its base and getting more and more everyday petition signers and architect and engineer petition signers. If it wasn't for, the last 7 or 8 years of work, we wouldn't have been able to submit the resolution a few weeks ago. It's because we have all of these petition signers and this active base that we're able to be the head of the spear for the movement and bring this issue to where it needs to be discussed, which is at the floor of the AIA convention. So thanks to everyone for making that possible.
Absolutely. And we're going to keep people updated on what's going on with this. In May, we're going to tell everyone the outcome, and we're going to keep on moving forward. And, there's great things happening at AE911Truth over the past year or two, largely because of you guys' great effort. I don't think you guys get enough credit. So, Ted Walter, Kelly David, thank you so much for coming on 911 Freefall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This program's on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.